Okay, today is Wednesday, July 16, 2003. This is Stephen Fagan with the Sixth Floor Museum at Dealey Plaza, and the interview we are doing today is part of the museum's oral history collection. And today we are pleased to be interviewing Mr. H.B. McClain. Thank you very much for coming to the museum and participating in this project. For the record, at the beginning of these oral histories, we ask you to give us your full name, date and place of birth, and just a brief summary of your childhood.
Well, I was born in Nacogdoches County in November of 1927. In 1942, we moved to Dallas, and I've been here ever since.
Did you go to war, World War II?
No, I was in the Merchant Marines.
Okay. Can you describe that experience a little bit for us?
Well, there wasn't much to it. Just went to Catalina Island for training. Left there, went to Seattle, Washington to load up the ship. And at that time, the war was ended, and we would another 6-8 months, and then we come back to the States, and I never did go back anymore.
You came back to Dallas?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when did you join the Dallas Police Force?
1953.
What made you want to become a police officer?
I wanted to do that ever since I was a kid.
Was there a particular reason?
I just like what they do, I guess. I don't know. It's just something I wanted to do.
Can you describe for me, if you can, for people watching this tape who weren't alive in the 1950s and 1960s, just what type of city Dallas was like? If you want to compare it to maybe today, that's fine too, but just a description.
Well, you didn't have near the traffic that you've got. You didn't have near the crime that you've got.
What was your first position with the police department?
I was a patrolman. Mm-hmm. First job was working the fair at Fair Park. When I got out of school, that school that graduated during that period worked the fair, their first assignment. And then I went on work patrol in different places.
When did you become a solo motorcycle officer?
That was in 1954.
Okay. And you held that position for how long?
Till 1975.
Okay. What would be your typical duties as a motorcycle officer?
Enforcing traffic regulations, working accidents, just mostly pertaining to traffic.
Okay. In the late 1950s, early 1960s, do you remember any of the political activities in the city, any of the right-wing extremist atmosphere, General Edwin Walker, for instance, or Bruce Alger? Do you remember any of those instances?
I remember the incident, but I don't know. I paid no attention to it. I didn't read the paper, because I don't even take the paper now. Mm-hmm. And it just didn't interest me.
Do you recall when, about a month before the assassination in October, when Adlai Stevenson was here in Dallas and he was spit on and hit with some signs?
Yeah.
Was that talked about often in the police department?
I don't recall it being talked about. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of it on the newspapers.
When it was announced that the president was coming to town, do you recall any apprehension, or was there any worry or discussion that there might be some sort of violence directed at him or any sort of demonstration?
No, to us it was just another escort.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember when you first heard about the president's visit to Dallas?
It was 2 or 3 days before we got here, I guess.
Okay. And when did you receive your assignment for that day?
That morning.
That morning. And just briefly, can you just outline what your assignment was?
First, we went out to Love Field and picked him up there and escorted him back the route that they had set up for him, all the way down through town. And there was a motorcycle officer on each side of the caravan, and they was, I don't know, 8 or 10 of us that was in it.
I read yesterday that, and maybe you can confirm this for me, originally was there a different layout for the motorcycles along the presidential limousine? Weren't you originally supposed to be closer to the limousine than you ended up being? Or is that not true?
Myself?
Yes.
No, I don't know about that.
Okay.
But they did change the positions that everybody normally worked.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody worked in pairs, had a partner. And they come along and they change the partner and put them on the opposite sides to what they normally ride.
And so what was your position, what was your scheduled position in the motorcade?
Myself and Marion Baker was just ahead of the bus, or with the bus.
Mm-hmm. And that would have been about how far behind the limousine?
That was about 5 or 6 cars back.
Okay. And so you arrived out at Love Field. Do you remember what time?
No, we got there kind of early.
Okay. Was there already crowds starting to
There
gather?
was a big crowd out there.
Can you describe just the general atmosphere, what it was like out at Love Field?
Well, everybody was happy and laughing, carrying on, waiting for him to get there. And then when he got there, everybody started waving and hollering and carrying on. He shook hands with a bunch of people.
Did you get a good look at both the president and Mrs. Kennedy?
Yeah,
Were you fans of the president?
not particular.
Okay. So you all fell into. Did you fall into place before the president got into his car or afterwards?
Well, we were all on our motors, and as they pulled out the gate, everybody fell in where they're supposed to be.
Okay. Well, if you can, in as much detail as you can remember, if you could just kind of describe the trip downtown and talk about the crowds and just the general atmosphere, and go ahead and stop before the assassination. I'll ask another question then.
Well, let's see. I believe we went down Maple Avenue. Well, it's been so long, I can't remember.
I understand. It's okay. Don't worry about
which way we went.
But just the general crowds. Do you recall? There was.
Well, there wasn't
people?
too big a crowd until you got downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And when you got downtown, they were just wall to wall.
Did you keep an eye on the limousine in front of you, or you?
I didn't have time.
Okay.
I was trying to get through them people that wouldn't get out of the way.
Did you talk to Marion Baker at all during the trip?
No.
No. Okay.
You don't have time, and you don't do that.
Had you done escort work before in the past?
Oh yeah, we've escorted several. Let's see, we escorted Humphreys. There was somebody else. I've escorted 2 or 3 of them.
Presidents?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But was Kennedy your first in 1963, or?
No, it was the last one, I think.
Okay. Well, as you approached Dealey Plaza, you turned from Maine onto Houston. Describe for me, if you can, what happened during the assassination itself, where you were and what you did.
Okay, we came down Main Street, made a right turn on to Houston, and I stopped right directly across the entrance to the old jail. And I was sitting there, well, standing really. I was head on both feet, one on each side of the motor, and waiting for them, and they was going down Elm Street. They had turned to go down Elm Street to the triple underpass. And they got, I guess maybe a half a block down there when I heard the shots. I looked up, and I could see all these pigeons coming out from behind the school depository building. I just made a comment to myself, somebody's shooting at the pigeons today. And about that time, the chief called on the radio and said, head for Parkland. So the race was on.
So you had stopped on Houston before you noticed any shots being fired?
Right.
Okay. You would just stop to let the parade catch up with you?
Right.
Okay.
Well, you have to stop every once in a while. Well, you kind of seesaw back and forth to make sure everything is, and keep people out of the way. They'll walk right out in front of them cars if you don't do something.
Do you remember what the locations in the motorcade that you were kind of seesawing back and forth between? President Johnson's car, I know you were kind of close to it.
Yeah, that and the bus, the press bus, back between the two of them.
Okay. At the time, you only heard one shot?
That's all I recall hearing.
Mm-hmm. And did you turn towards the motorcade after you looked at the depository?
Yeah, I looked over there. After I looked up, I just looked straight up when I heard the shot. But I didn't, all I seen was the pigeons.
And then when you glanced at the limousine, what did you see?
I seen Miss Kennedy up on her hands and knees, and one of the security people crawling over the back of the car. Then I seen my ex-partner on his hands and knees going up that grassy knoll over.
And who was that?
And Bobby Hargis.
Bobby Hargis, okay. What were you thinking at that moment? Did you realize something had happened?
I knew something happened, but I had no idea what it was.
Mm-hmm. Did you connect that in your mind between the sounds you heard and the pigeons and the car? Did you think it was all related, or?
No, not really, because I don't know. I just wasn't thinking about that.
It all happened pretty fast.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, as you said, the race was on as you sped up. What did you see as you drove through the plaza?
I seen Hargis crawling up that knoll and just everybody going every which way.
Did you think anything about that?
And I knew something had happened because the chief had already come on the radio and said a shot had been fired and head for Parkland. Well, we had instruction when we left that if anything happened, we went straight to Parkland. And that's the way we went.
Do you recall what happened to Marion Baker about this time?
I lost him.
Okay. because of course he was the first officer.
I think he instead of coming on to the hospital, he went on over to the school, over to this building.
Right. He was the first person inside the building, and he actually encountered Lee Harvey Oswald on the second floor. That's very interesting. So you drove to Parkland pretty fast. Did you stay with the motorcade, or were you pretty much on your own at that point?
Well, I was kind of back, behind the. But before they got there, I had caught up with them and got up to the front, and I was one of the front jockeys in front of the chief's car.
Okay. Well, tell me what happened when you got to Parkland, if you would.
Okay, we pulled in behind Parkland, and everybody went every which way, and the doctors came out to get him out of the car. Well, she wouldn't let him have him. She just laid down across his head and wouldn't let him have him. So I reached over and caught her by the shoulders. And, come on, ma'am, let him take him on inside. So I finally got her up, and they took him on in, and I walked her on into the inside of the hospital. As soon as I got her in there, I turned around and come back out.
Did Mrs. Kennedy say anything?
Not to me.
Was she crying?
Oh yeah, she was almost hysterical sometimes.
When you saw the president, did he have something? Did he have a coat over his head at that point? Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't get a look at his wound at all?
No, I seen some of his skull laying in the floorboard of the car.
Can you describe just what the inside of the limousine looked like?
Oh, it looked like any normal limousine. There were just some spotches of blood and pieces of flesh laying in the floor.
What were you thinking at that point?
I don't know. I just didn't think. I mean, that was just a blank.
From what you saw in the car, did you think that the president was fatally wounded?
I figured he was.
Well, then, what happened after you? When you went into the emergency room, you took Jackie Kennedy in there. Where did you leave her at?
There in the emergency room, some of the doctors or FBI or Secret Service rather came and got her.
Did you see anything amongst the FBI and the Secret Service? What were they doing at that point?
Well, there was one FBI man that decided he's going to get right in the middle of all of it. The Secret Service told him to go on, get out of there. He said, I'm FBI. He said, I don't care who you are. We don't need you. And he mouthed off some more. He turned around, one of the officers standing there and said, escort him outside and don't let him back in.
Okay. Did you see anything else while you were in there that's worth? That's a good story. Anything else?
I figured that was time for me to get out of there.
Okay. So what did you do when you went back outside?
I just went back outside and stood around like everybody else.
Okay.
And then when they got ready to send Johnson to the airport, me and somebody else, I don't know who it was, escorted him back out to the airplane out of Love Field.
Did you see Johnson? I mean, were you beside him at any time?
Oh yeah, when he come out to get in the car, and then when he got out.
Do you recall anything about his expression, the way he looked?
No.
What he might have been feeling at that point?
I think he's wanting to get the hell out of Dodge.
Was Lady Bird with him? His wife?
Yeah, I believe she was. I think carried her, and Jackie went with them.
Okay. So after you got back out to Love Field, pick up the story there and tell me what happened.
They got out and went up on the plane, and we stood around until they took off. And when they took off, we went on back about our business.
Did you know at the time that he was being sworn in as the president aboard the plane?
Yeah.
How did you find that out?
Just hearsay.
Mm-hmm. And, well, if you can, tell me about...
Well, they did. No, they told us that Judge Hughes was on her way out to swear him in after they got to Love Field. They called her, and she came out and swore him in on the plane out there. So we waited. She got there, swore him in, and then they took off. Well, they brought the body out there and put it on the plane, and they all went back to Washington.
Did you saw Judge Hughes arrive and go on the plane?
Yeah.
Okay. There were press beginning to arrive at both Parkland Hospital and then at Love Field. Did you see any of these trucks and the cameras start to come out?
Well, that's normal anywhere you got something like that. So I pay no attention to it. They just out there doing their job.
Was there other officers that were assigned to kind of keep them back?
Oh yeah, you had crowd control and all that out there. Mm-hmm. There was some officers left to guard the plane during all that going on, even when there wasn't nobody out there.
Were you asked for any statements or interviews while you were in the middle of all of this?
No.
Okay. So when you left Love Field, about what time was that? Right after the plane took off?
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you do from there for the rest of the day?
Best I recall, we got a call to report to the office, all of us. And the Secret Service wanted to interview all the motor jockeys. And they wanted to know what happened. We started telling them what happened, how it happened. They said, no, it happened this way. We said, no, it happened this way. He said, you're wrong. It happened this way. So we finally all just told him, to the hell with you. You ain't going to believe what we tell you. We ain't telling you nothing else.
This was
got up and walked out.
This was the day of the assassination.
It was that day or the next day. I don't remember just when it was.
Do you recall what the Secret Service, the way they were trying to tell you it happened?
No, they had their own views as to how it happened. And they wouldn't hear no other way.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that before.
Just like they were dead set on that microphone that was stuck.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be in a certain place to do what they said it done. And I was the only one that was anywhere close to that position, so they pinned it on me.
Well, I want to talk about that in just a second, because the microphone issue didn't actually come up until the 1970s, correct?
Right.
Okay. So either that day or the next day you talked to the Secret Service. Did you ever talk to anyone else that weekend? Any reporters or anyone else?
I don't recall any.
Okay. Did you fill out a statement with the police, a normal report?
No.
Okay. Did you have any other assignments that evening?
I don't recall what we had.
Okay. You remember what time you got off work?
I think at about 11 or 12 o'clock that night.
Okay. Saturday and Sunday, did you have anything to do with the police those days? Other than maybe being interviewed by the Secret Service?
I don't think so.
Did you ever see Oswald in custody?
Oh yeah, I was there the night they brought him in.
Can you talk about that when you saw him?
Oh, he was just screaming and hollering, "What am I here for? I ain't done nothing." And he's wanting to fight everybody that came around.
You never talked to him personally, though?
No.
Okay.
They just shoved him right on by me and in Captain Fritz's office.
Can you describe the police station in the frenzy that followed the assassination? I mean, we've all seen the news footage, but just the way it was like with all the cameramen and all the news reporters, can you just describe the atmosphere?
Well, you couldn't hardly walk through it. Everybody milling around, bright lights everywhere.
Had you ever seen it that bad before?
No, I hadn't.
Was that
But
the worst?
I imagine up there in Fritz's office that they've seen it, but there's on occasion I've had to go up there to his office.
On Sunday when Oswald was shot, do you recall where you were?
I was sitting at home watching it on TV.
What were your thoughts when you saw that happen?
I don't remember what my thoughts was back then. That's too long ago. I've slept since then.
Okay. Did you recognize Jack Ruby? Had you seen him before?
Yeah, I had seen him before.
Did you know Jack Ruby at all?
Nothing other than just who he was.
So you had seen him around the police station?
Yeah, and one of my ex-partners knew him pretty well.
Had you heard anything about him? What kind of a guy he was? Anything? Before he
No,
shot
not
Oswald?
before.
Afterwards, did you hear talk about him?
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the things that were talked about?
Oh, about the clubs that he run and being involved with the mafia and stuff like that.
Did you believe any of that?
I didn't know. I didn't know that. I'd only seen him. I went to his place one time with my partner, and he introduced me to him, and they talked for a few minutes, and we left. And that's the last time I seen him until the day that they shot Oswald.
After the assassination, did you talk to anyone else between this time and then in the 1970s when the open mic controversy started?
No.
You did not testify to the Warren Commission?
Yeah, I went up to Washington and talked to them.
This was in 1964?
No, I thought that was in 80 or 81.
Well, the first investigation was the Warren Commission. That was the commission that President Johnson assigned, and they found that Oswald was the lone gunman.
No, I didn't talk to them.
Okay. and then they reopened the investigation in the 70s. I want to talk about that. But during the 1960s, you never talked to anyone else about this?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. Well, in the 1970s, the House Select Committee on Assassination started their second investigation on the assassination, and a new controversy arose regarding a police radio mic. Can you just talk about what that controversy was and just describe it to the best of your ability?
Well, they said that they brought some acoustic people in to try to find out where the shots were, or how many shots there were. And they said it was on a motorcycle, and it had to be in a certain spot for it to pick up the sounds. And unfortunately, my motorcycle was in the spot that they said it's supposed to come from.
Would this have been on a particular channel?
Yeah.
Can you describe, it was 2 channels, correct?
Yeah.
Can you describe what the difference is for people that might not know between channels 1 and 2?
Well, channel 1 is for routine, everyday police work. Channel 2 is for special events.
So all of the motorcycles should have been on channel 2. Okay, and the accusation was that yours was either on or stuck and on channel 1.
Mine was stuck.
Okay. For individuals who might not have a very good idea of the police radio system, can you kind of describe that, what a dictative out recording is, and how, how that's done?
I don't know how it's done, but it's a little old cylinder about 1.5 inches, 2 inches in diameter, and about 4 or 5 inches long, that they put on a machine that puts the sound on it. You always drove the same motorcycle, correct? Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a particular number on that motorcycle?
Now, don't ask me what that number was.
Okay. Okay. Had you ever had any microphone trouble on that particular motorcycle?
Oh yeah. Whenever you lay something up against it.
Had all the officers probably at one time or another had problems with their own microphones?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Had yours ever become stuck before, though?
Not stuck.
Okay.
There's always something other against it.
Mm-hmm. But do you recall exactly what channel you were on that day?
It's on channel 2.
Channel 2. Okay. It's good to have that for the record. But you were called to Washington to talk about this. Can you describe that experience for me?
Well, to start with, they sent me a ticket, I went to Love Field to catch a plane. While I was at Love Field, they kept announcing over the loudspeaker for me to go to such and such place to see somebody that they wanted to talk to me. But when I left, I got orders not to talk to anybody until I got there. So I paid no attention to them, because it was the news people. Went on up there, and they picked me up at the airport, carried me on up to the office, and we talked for I don't know how long. And they kept asking me questions that I had to answer them with, it was possible. They wouldn't let me listen to the tape. I asked them if I could listen to the tape. Well, you don't need to listen to that. So I just said everything was possible. And when I got back to town, went back to work the next day, J.C. Bowles called me over to his office. He was I think he was a lieutenant or captain one, I forget now which. And I walked in his office, and he said, Mac said, did you hear them? Have you heard those tapes before you went up yonder? I said, no, sir. And they wouldn't let me listen to them up there. So he sent me and took me in one of his other rooms in there, sat me down and said, I want you to listen to these. So I sat down and listened to them. When I got through, I come back out, and there was one man in his office. He introduced me. I forget now who it was, but he was a newsman. And it wasn't 5 minutes till that room was full of newsmen. And then they started questioning me about the tapes and about the microphones. And I said, no, it wasn't mine. Couldn't be. Because you can tell the difference in the sound of a three-wheeler running and a solo motorcycle running. And it was not mine.
What kind of, can you describe what the difference would be between those two types of motorcycles?
Well, the three-wheeler's got a chattering sound. And the solo, if it's just idling, goes thump, 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 thump. But the three-wheeler,
where were the three-wheelers during the
well,
motor?
they was all over everywhere.
Do you have any particular theories as to where this particular one that recorded this?
I know right exactly where it was, who was riding it.
Well, can you tell us?
It was Les Bilehorse, and he was assigned out at the trademark where they were supposed to be going. And he always whistled when he was riding. And you could hear him whistling just as plain as day. But it took us about 3 or 4 days to figure out who it was. JC and I was working on it, trying to figure out who it was. We'd listen to it. And we kept on, and it finally dawned on us that Les always whistled when he was riding his motor. We checked. He was assigned out there. And they heard on there where Station 1, which was the sheriff's department, heard that on the tape. Well, the sheriff only had one car in the whole thing, and it was out at the trademark where Les was. And then the story of the bell, the church bell that was so many thousands of years old. Nobody could figure that one out. When I left JC's office that evening going home, as I was crossing the street, there was a pickup truck making a left turn in front of me, and he ran across a manhole cover that was loose. The front wheel hit it, the back wheel hit it. Bong, bong. So I called JC, told him, I said, hey, I found out where your bell is. He said, where? I said, it's a manhole cover. So they checked out at Trademark out there. Sure enough, there was a manhole cover there where Les kept riding back and forth. And it was loose. So he was running over that manhole cover, making it sound like a bell ringing.
How do you account for the impulses on the tape that investigators said were the shots?
It was the radio popping. Them old radios, they pop something fierce. I don't guess they ever took one of the radios and listened to it. They just assumed that my mic was stuck and that was shots that they were hearing.
Did you and Bowles ever confront this motorcycle officer about that?
I didn't. He might have.
Do you know if he's deceased now?
I don't think he is.
Okay. Well, that might be worth looking up and doing an oral history with him too.
I don't remember him dying, but there's been so many of them, it's hard to tell.
That's true. So over the years, since the 1970s, this has plagued you, has it not?
In a way.
Can you talk about just how it feels? I mean, you do have a piece of this. I mean, you are a part of this story. You're a piece of history now, an unwilling piece, of course. But how do you feel being a part of this story?
Just unfortunate being at the right spot at the wrong time.
Have you turned down some interviews in the past?
Yeah.
Well, we're certainly grateful that
I
you
got tricked into one time.
Really. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, I had already gone down to the county and went to work down there as a deputy sheriff. Got promoted to sergeant in '85, I think it was. And I was working the old jail one day, filling in because they was short a sergeant over there. And they called, the chief's office called, sheriff's office called, said, Max said, Sheriff wants you in his office. I said, I can't leave here. I'm the only one here. Okay. A few minutes, somebody else called. Mac, Sheriff wants you in his office. I said, I'm the only one here. I cannot leave. And it wasn't a little bit later till somebody else called again. And I said, I can't leave. Well, the sheriff wants to see you right now. I said, come on. Well, that was one of the deputy chiefs, so I said, well, you want me to just leave this jail unattended? Yeah, come on. I said, okay. So I got on the elevator and went downstairs and walked out on the street. Well, there was a lieutenant just parking his car, was coming to relieve me to go to the sheriff's office. Well, the sheriff was having an interview of a bunch of college kids, I guess, that wanted an interview with him. And I walked in there and he was up there talking to him. And I walked in the door and he said, where in the hell you been? I said, I've been hiding from you, or trying to hide from you. He said, well, these people wants an interview, and said, I'm going to let you take over and answer their questions.
And this would have been Sheriff Bowles, correct?
Right. And that's how I got into that one.
Are you and Bowles still friends today?
I hadn't talked to Bowles well, I left in '97, and I hadn't talked to him since.
Just one or two more questions about the microphone, because questions do come up here often about it, and I want to be able to refer to this interview and point them in this direction if they want answers. If your microphone was stuck when you were driving, would there have been any type of noise, any kind of static or anything?
Nope, there wouldn't have been nothing. It just been blank. Okay. And I wouldn't have heard the orders to go to Parkland Hospital.
That was my other question. You heard that right after the shot. You wouldn't have been able to hear that if your microphone was on channel 1, correct?
That's right. After that interview over at Bowles' office, they told me I was just dumb, didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know whether it was or wasn't.
Well, it to this day remains a extremely controversial point, and that acoustic evidence has been studied over the years, and it's still being studied today. It's never been definitively proven one way or the other, and so the jury's still out on that.
Well, if it was that three-wheel motorcycle that was stuck, there ain't no way in this world he could have heard any shots on it, because it's 2.5 miles up the street up there.
Right.
I mean, it's...
The story you told us today about the motorcycle officer at the Trademark, did you tell that to the press in the 1970s?
Mm-mm.
Have you told that to anyone?
We didn't figure that out until I come back from up Washington.
Who have you told that story to besides me?
J.C. Bolt.
Really?
He and I both figured it out together.
Okay. So
and I hadn't told nobody.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly glad to have this on the record here, because maybe that can shed some light on this.
At the time, he wouldn't let me tell nobody. He said, just hang on to it, because there hadn't nobody confronted Les with it at that time.
Mm-hmm. Have you studied the assassination? Have you read a lot of these books and watched the films?
I've got several books, but I hadn't studied it. I just read through it.
Do you have any thoughts on why 40 years later it continues to be talked about, and why you're here for the interview today and things like that?
Well, you just got that different types of people that some believe and some don't believe. And the ones that don't believe and the one that believes is trying to sway the others to go their way.
Have you always been convinced that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone?
No, not really. I don't believe the man was shot from where they say he was.
You think a shot came from another location?
I think it come off of that railroad overpass.
But is that based on anything you saw that day, or is that based on other things you've read?
Do you do hunt? Have you ever been hunting?
I don't do it myself, but I've heard of it. I mean, I've heard people talk about it.
Okay, if you shoot something,
Mm-hmm.
the force of the bullet is going to push him away from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the force of this bullet throwed him this way, and then back this way. So I think the man was shot twice.
So
Because he was falling away, and then all of a sudden he just fired back the other way.
So that's based on a film that you've seen of the shooting, the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
Okay, but what I mean is that you didn't actually see anything that particular day that would lead you to think that there would be somebody up, say, on the grass.
Nothing other than the fact that he was falling forward and to the left, and all of a sudden he just jerked back.
Okay.
And there had to be something that would force him back the other way.
Did you ever talk to any of the other officers about the assassination, exchange ideas or opinions about it? Okay. Did you ever talk to your ex-partner, Bobby Hargis, about his experiences that day?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm just about out of questions. At the end of these interviews, we always leave it open. If there's any stories or anecdotes or any aspect of your story that I didn't cover here, again, this is for history, and this is an interview we hope that'll be available 100 years from now. So if there's anything you want to put on the record, I leave it open to you.
Yeah, right now I can't think of nothing else.
Okay. Well, if something important comes up in the future, we can certainly add to it if you want to come back, and we can do another one. But we certainly appreciate you being here today, and